Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. So I'm back again pretty quickly with another video, this time doing another response video. If you watched the previous one, you'll notice that was a response video as well. And I've just seen a lot of people coming up with interesting topics lately, so I thought it's a fun thing to do. So this one was created by a guy called Raul. So I'm sure a lot of you know him. Definitely check out his channel, I'll link it in the description. He is a really nice guy and I enjoy watching his videos. He came up with a topic recently called Love at First Listen. So basically the essence of that topic is talk about albums which you loved immediately when you first heard them. So not so much albums which you love now and they didn't grab you at first or they grew on you, just ones that instantly floored you. So for me that's difficult. I suppose with a lot of people, because you grow to love a lot of albums and it's hard to remember which ones really, kicked your ass in the first listen. But I thought about it carefully and I thought this one's fun to do. Unfortunately, I have quite a lot to talk about, so I'm not going to go into too much detail with each one. I'll just go through it quickly. And yeah, so these are albums which floored me or kicked my ass on the first listen and which I generally still love to this day. In fact, all of them really, so I couldn't say there's any that I've gone off. But yeah, we'll just get straight into it. Before I do, what I put on in the background, this is Hypocrisy with Into the Abyss, classic Swedish melodic death metal featuring Peter Tugtren. I chose this one for today because it's actually the 21st anniversary of the release of this album. Really great album. It includes the song Fire in the Sky, which is my favorite Hypocrisy song. That song is just so epic and symphonic and melodic, just great. Yep, so that's Hypocrisy with Into the Abyss. Alright, so talking about albums that I totally loved upon first listen, what I'm going to do to be a bit different is start with the records and then go on to the CDs. Okay, so the first album, this is Accept with Metal Heart. So you'll notice that I've spoken about this a couple of times, including in the last video. This was a band that I only first discovered, believe it or not, about 11 years ago. I'd always heard of them and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take a chance on an album and buy it, see what they're like, and it was actually this one. And I was just completely floored when I first heard it. Just absolutely amazing German heavy metal. It's got that 80s retro sound, razor sharp riffs, those kind of AC/DC vocals from Udo, and when I just heard the opening riff of Midnight Mover and then Up to the Limit, I was completely hooked on this album. And I still, to this day, love it. It's a 10 out of 10, so Accept with Metal Heart. Okay, coming up next, we have Alcatraz with Dangerous Games. So again, I've already spoken about this album. This was in a video which wasn't very popular with a lot of people, but yeah, I really feel this band doesn't get enough recognition. This album is probably my favorite in their entire discography. What I love about it, it's just got that classic 80s retro sound, very sort of synth rock, not synth pop, synth rock, 80s retro style, and just really memorable, with shredding guitar solos, keyboard solos, and amazing soaring powerhouse vocals. But so many great tracks on this. Some of my favorites are It's My Life, a cover by The Animals, Undercover, Dangerous Games, the title track is probably my favorite one on the album, and also Double Man. But this is really addictive to listen to, so great album. That's Alcatraz with Dangerous Games. Okay, coming up next, Herat with Drawing Down the Moon. So when I first heard this album, I was in my teen years. I think I've mentioned before, I heard Solomon's Gate played on a tape compilation, and I was just stunned by how cold and grim it sounded and atmospheric, with that really sort of raw, ethereal kind of atmosphere with the keyboards and everything, and these just sort of ritualistic passages. So yeah, that track, Solomon's Gate, is what grabbed me initially, and then when I bought this album, a couple of years later, I just really loved it. I recently got this on vinyl because it's just essential to own. Brilliant Finnish black death metal. You've got to check it out. So I'm sure most of you already know this. If you don't, check it out. That's Herat with Drawing Down the Moon. Sorry, I keep shifting the vinyls, but the angle's not very good. Okay, up next, Bewitched with Pentagram Prayer. So again, I've spoken about this one. This is black speed metal from Sweden, and when I first heard it, I was 19 years old, and I remember I'd read interviews with them and they said it's sort of like speed metal with black, but I thought it's quite funny because their image was black metal with corpse paint and everything like that and spiked. So then I heard the music and I thought, it's brilliant, just incredibly energetic speed metal with black metal vocals, and it's just really fun, like blistering guitar solos, that great fantastic 80s vibe, and over 20 years on, like 23 years on, I still love this album, so definitely check it out, Bewitched with Pentagram Prayer. Okay, up next, an album which needs no introduction, Dark Throne with Under a Funeral Moon. Okay, so this is one of those albums, nothing really needs to be said that hasn't already been said, but I'll just say this, I'll never forget when I first heard it. I was 16 years old in Byron Bay, Australia, which is kind of like a surfy coastal town, and at the time I was already listening to black metal. I listened to bands like Emperor and Immortal, and I'd always heard of Dark Throne, but I went into this surfy music shop, and they had all this indie alternative music, and I remember among all the coloured covers, there was this black and white one that stood out, and I went, oh, I've got to listen to this. So I asked the guy in the shop, can I play it on the listening station? He said, yeah, sure. And then I heard the first 2 tracks, Natasha in Eternal Sleep and Summer of the Diabolical Holocaust, and I was just gobsmacked. I was going, this sounds so cold and grim and ugly, and like, you know, the production, just it was really like grim and menacing sounding, and like that first track, Natasha in Eternal Sleep, was such an unconventional way of songwriting. And then I heard Summer of the Diabolical Holocaust, you know, when they have that slow bit in the middle, like the breakdown and the guitar solo, I just thought, wow, I love this, I'm instantly hooked on it. So that secured my status as a Dark Throne fan when I first heard this one. To this day, it's still my favorite. Probably a close second would be Transylvanian Hunger, but this one, absolutely essential. So Dark Throne, Under a Funeral Moon. Okay, up next, another classic, which needs no introduction, Dio with Holy Diver. So this is one, again, where believe it or not, I hadn't heard it until about 11 years ago. It was one of those bands I always heard about, so once again, I just took a chance with this album, and like as soon as I heard Stand Up and Shout at the beginning, I was just going, wow, that's really energetic and catchy, and then I just heard the rest of the album, like the title track, and just fell in love with it instantly. To this day, I still love it. There is nothing bad to say about this album. It's flawless, it's perfect, 10 out of 10, essential heavy metal, so Dio with Holy Diver. Okay, coming up next, another band which I discovered at the same time as Dio and Accept. This is Dokken with Under Lock and Key. So Dokken is one of those bands, I think a lot of people categorize them as glam metal or hair metal, but it's not as glammy as, say, I don't know, Motley Crue or Warrant or Poison, something like that. It's kind of in that vein, like you wouldn't, it's not Iron Maiden, but anyway, forget labels, it's just awesome. This is another band I just took a chance on. This was the first album I bought, just loved it. Again, pretty much a flawless album in terms of songs, like some of my favorites though, Unchain the Night, The Hunter, Lightning Strikes Again, It's Not Love, Jaded Heart, Don't Lie to Me. See, I've nearly mentioned the whole album, and this one is just a bunch of fun to listen to every time I hear it. Like fantastic shredding solos from George Lynch, great 80s atmosphere, brilliant vocal performance from Don Dokken, and just every band member shines on this album. So Dokken with Under Lock and Key. Okay, now moving to something completely different. This is Graveland with Creed of Iron. Classic album. So, when I was in my tape trading days in my early 20s, a friend gave me a burned copy, like CD, of this album, and then I heard it and I just thought, I've never heard anything so atmospheric and majestic in my life. It really reminds me a lot of Conan the Barbarian, you know, that soundtrack, really epic and haunting and majestic, and like some of these songs just soar for the heights. This is for sure in my top 5 black metal albums of all time. Every song on it is great. This one actually, it's got Raiders of Revenge. It has some bonus tracks, but what's my absolute favorite track on this song? It's on this album. It would be No Mercy in My Heart. That's my favorite Graveland song. You cannot get, in my opinion, more powerful, more majestic, more atmospheric than that song. It gives me goosebumps every time I listen to it. The hairs on my arms stand up when I listen to that song. Just such a great, dark, haunting atmosphere, taking you into the world of Conan the Barbarian, at least in my mind, but loved it when I first heard it, still love it now. Just brilliant 10 out of 10 album, Graveland, Creed of Iron. Okay, now the next one, this one is somewhat of a cliche, but you know, cliches come from somewhere. Iron Maiden with Number of the Beast. So, I first heard this in my teen years, and I had actually already, the first album I ever bought by them was Fear of the Dark, which I really love, and then this one came later on, but it was just one of those albums, yeah, love it, first listen. As soon as I heard it, you know, just the amount of variety in all of these tracks. Like, everyone knows the songs like the back of their hand, you know, so I don't need to mention them. But, you know, some which really stood out to me at the time were Invaders, Run to the Hills, Number of the Beast. I've heard a lot of people say they don't like Gangland, but I love that song. But Hallowed Be Thy Name, that song just grows and grows on me. You know, to this day, I just like it more and more. So, like, yeah, classic heavy metal album, and I've loved it from the beginning, the first time, and I still do. So Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast. Okay, up next, this is Rat with Out of the Cellar. This is another band that I discovered relatively recently. Like, I've always known about them, but it was a few years ago, I think on a Facebook page or something, you know, one of those metal groups, they just share videos, and one day I just decided to just hit play and listen to this album, and then I heard Wanted Man, and I just thought, wow, this is amazing, like total nostalgia trip to the 80s. Like, that song Wanted Man is brilliant, and just really loved every aspect of their music. And I think this band, yeah, they're a glam metal band, but they have their own sound. That's what I like about them. They would be in my top 3, I think, of bands in that genre. I just think they're really unique, especially Stephen Pearcy's voice. Like, I remember someone described his vocals as sounding like sandpaper on chrome. Like, it's awesome, like screechy and raspy, but like the guitars are raunchy and rocking. Such memorable, catchy songs. Like, you can sing along. I sing my heart out when I listen to this album. It's true, but like literally every single track I like. You know, Wanted Man, You're in Trouble, Round and Round, In Your Direction, She Wants Money, Lack of Communication, Back for More, The Morning After, I'm Insane, Scene of the Crime. Just perfect. So if you haven't heard this album, I implore you to go and listen to it. Yeah, loved it from the first listen, still do. Rat, Out of the Cellar. Okay, and up next, shifting gears again to something completely different. Here we have Satanic Warmaster with Cathedral Satanist Madness. So, if you're not familiar, I'm sure you are, Satanic Warmaster is a largely one-man black metal project from Finland, and yeah, this was one of those bands, although I was listening to black metal since the 90s, it always passed me by. And then actually when I saw Nick's channel, Motley Crue Forever, I noticed he was always talking about this band a lot, and I thought, really got to go and check this band out. So this was the one I decided to take a gamble on, and just loved it. And I've got a lot of his other albums, which you've seen me talk about before, but this one, it's the first I heard, and it'll always be my favorite. Again, like Graveland's Creed of Iron, I just think it's a flawless album. Perfect 10 out of 10. Like, cold, grim. The recording is lo-fi, but just the melodies and the atmosphere and these emotive riffs that he writes, they're just absolutely ingenious. And then you've got that song, Blessed Be the Grim Arts at the end, which is like a just majestic Manowar-esque, like black metal Manowar or something, but it's so atmospheric with the keyboards and the vocals and everything. Like, yeah, literally every single song on this album just is amazing. So, loved it when I first heard it, still love it now. Satanic Warmaster with Cathedral Satanist Madness. Okay, so going to the CDs now, changing it up. Again, some of these I've spoken about, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but without further ado, first we have Blood Feast with Chopped, Sliced and Diced. So again, I mentioned this in the last video that I made. Yep, very fast, energetic death thrash from the US, sort of evolving from the days where thrash metal was slowly turning into death metal, so that crossover kind of style. That's the style that this band plays. Anyway, I bought this, I don't know, it was about a year ago actually, but I'll never forget. I heard this as a 6-track EP, just so full of energy and fantastic riffs. As soon as it finished, I hit play again, so that's a sign you love it. And I felt that it was too short, like only 6 tracks, but I just devoured it and still love it. So definitely check it out, Blood Feast with Chopped, Sliced and Diced. Alright. Okay, now, coming up to the next one, I've already recently spoken about this, Burzum Visluset tar Os. So, one-man Norwegian black metal, everyone knows. If you want to know more about this, you can watch the video I made about my Burzum collection. That was 2 videos back. This was the first one I heard at age 19, and I just remember when I first heard that song, Det som en gang var, you know, with the thunderous drumming and the soaring ambient keyboards and everything, and the majesty, I just was floored by that song, and then in a daze for the rest of the album because it was so good. So I really am a big fan of Burzum. I like all of his albums, especially, well, the ones from the early days especially, but this one would definitely be my favorite. Yeah, loved it then and I still love it now. So Börsen with Vis Lucet Tar Os. Okay, all right, now I'm going to put a disclaimer up, so maybe look away if you're offended by explicit artwork. Okay, I don't have the censored copy. Cannibal Corpse with the Wretched Spawn. So you may have heard me say that I'm a huge fan of Cannibal Corpse, absolutely true. They have so many brilliant albums and I've been a fan of theirs since the early 90s, but this is one that I distinctly remember. I loved it the first time I heard it. You know, like a lot of their albums, sometimes they take time to, like with a lot of bands, they take time to grow on you, but I remember this one immediately kicked my ass. Like, just so good. The production, the technicality. These songs are technical, yet they're hooky, and there's so much energy. The vocals, like the mix, absolutely everything about it is perfect. And so many great songs on this. But some of my favorites: Severed Head Stoning, Psychotic Precision, Decency Defied, Frantic Disembowelment, The Wretched Spawn, Cyanide Assassin, Festering in the Crypt, Slain. Slain is one of my favorites, and They Deserve to Die. See, I've read about 2/3 of the album. Not to say that the rest is bad, it's awesome. And it's quite funny that at the time when this album came out, when it was new, I was really a bit miserable at the time. I hated my job at the time, and this album brought me some happiness. As funny as that sounds to say, because musically it was just so good. So yeah, funny, would I say it's my favorite one? That's hard. It's hard to rank Cannibal Corpse albums, but all I remember was this was one where I just absolutely loved the whole thing on the first listen. So Cannibal Corpse with The Wretched Spawn. Okay, now I'm not going too badly for time. Right, so the next one, classic album in my eyes, Cathedral with the Carnival Bazaar. So if you're not familiar, Cathedral are a psychedelic doom metal band from the UK, sort of inspired by Black Sabbath, but pushing it further in a more psychedelic and heavy direction. It was formed by Lee Dorian, who used to be in Napalm Death. He's the vocalist, like singing melodically. But actually it was my younger brother who introduced me to this band. Like back in '97, he bought Supernatural Birth Machines, and I thought, wow, actually this is a really good album. Like, it's, at the time I was listening to more extreme stuff, but I thought, wow, it's just something about the melody, it's infectious with this band, and like they're so catchy, and like the vocals and the heaviness, it really floored me. So then shortly after that, I bought this one, the Carnival Bazaar, and I thought, people had told me this one's even better, and I agree, like this one is another 10 out of 10 album. It brings back a lot of memories from when I was, like when I started university, this like 97, that's when I bought this, and I remember always listening to it in the car on the way to uni, and like I'm just cranking it up. It was great, but like I'm really just so English in atmosphere and sound, and so many brilliant songs. Like again, I'm not going to just read out all the songs, but I like each and every one. So good. And this is another one of those albums that's just aged well. Like, I still find it exciting and interesting to listen to, and yeah, brilliant. So Cathedral with the Carnival Bazaar. Sorry, I'm distracted by Fire in the Sky in the background. Such a good song. All right, coming up next, an album which certainly needs no introduction again, Emperor with In the Night Side Eclipse. Okay, so yes, Emperor, one of the most established names in Norwegian black metal. I first heard this album when I was 16 years old, and it was actually quite funny. We were on holiday with my family, and my mum said, "Oh, I'll buy this for you," and the man in the shop said to my mum, "It's not for you, is it?" But yeah, I had heard them on the radio, you know, back in the days where you had to like tape songs off the radio, so I'd heard I Am the Black Wizards. But you know, just the fact that this album was so orchestral and symphonic and dark and haunting, it really soars for the heights. Like, I think it's a milestone in black metal, and with good reason. It's revered as one of the most legendary albums in the genre. So a lot of people say Anthems to the Welkin at Dusk is their favorite, or they feel that's the best. Yes, that is a brilliant album, I will admit, but for me, for nostalgic purposes and other reasons, this one will always be my favorite. But like, if you haven't heard this, you are doing yourself a great disservice. Go and listen to it after this. So, Emperor with In the Night Side Eclipse, timeless, love it. Okay, and coming up next, a related band. They did a split together. This is Enslaved with Frost. So, classic Viking metal album from Norway. I remember I listened to this band on that Emperor Enslaved split when I heard the song Slaget i Skogen Borten for. I just, again, that was a life-changing moment when I heard that song. I said, how does this get so atmospheric, majestic, haunting and dark, and just, oh, so evocative, that music. But then I decided to buy this album shortly after when I heard the instrumental Frost, you know, the tinkly keyboard introduction, and then Loka. Again, I was in shock by how brilliant this album was. And it was the first time I had heard what they call Viking metal, you know, so it's sort of, even though this band has been labeled as black metal as well, but it does have Viking atmospheres, you know, with the clean vocals and some of the instruments they used on this album, like the fretless bass and mouth harp and everything. But when I was in my last year of high school, which is when I bought this, I listened to this album every single day that year. So I'm very nostalgic once again, but like, again, yeah, every track is good, so I'm not even going to name favorites, but that's Enslaved with Frost. Okay. Coming up next, shifting gears, this is a completely different genre. We've got some punk. This is The Exploited with The Massacre. Okay, so this is actually an album, I only bought it recently. Remember I did a double video called Collection Update Mixed Bag. This was part of that update, and I actually forgot to include it because I was forgetful at the time. But yeah, again, this album I just loved immediately. I've been a fan of The Exploited since teen years. I had a friend who was really into punk, and the first album I heard was Punk's Not Dead. I also owned that one. And then I had always just thought, I've heard that a million times. I thought I should try buying some more. So on this Brazilian website, they were advertising this at a good price. I decided to take a chance. Fucking awesome. Like, what's interesting is it's like proto-punk thrash. It's like punk music but crossing over into thrash metal. Yeah, really, really amazing. But I would say some songs are actually, musically they're almost thrash, but you know, Watty's lead vocals is still that sort of shouty punk voice, but just awesome, you know. And then they've got those like football hooligan backing vocals where they're all chanting and shouting, but like this is just infectious, really catchy riffs, really energetic, memorable songs. I like, when I first bought this, I took it out when I was running a lot, and I've just heard it so many times already, and I still love it. So some of my favorite songs on this are The Massacre, Sick Bastard, Dog Soldier, Don't Pay the Poll Tax, Fuck Religion, yeah, Barry Prosset. Yeah, but there's so many, like literally every song is really good, so definitely check it out if you like some punk and if you like thrash metal. Exploited with The Massacre. So I'm happy to include that one because that's one I recently got. Like a lot of these other ones, they're from a long time ago, but this is a recent one that I've instantly loved. Okay, coming up next, a very important album for me. This is Impaled Nazarene with Tolkorm's Nors Nors Nors. So everyone, this band is well established, still around now, Finnish black metal. This album is important to me because it was the first black metal album I ever heard. So when I was in my teen years, like 14 years old, my friends and I were just starting to get into death metal, and there was this cinema in the city I lived in, Sydney, where they had this hole in the wall shop, and this guy who had this glass cabinet full of all these death metal and black metal CDs, and that's where I heard a lot of bands for the first time. Like, in fact, the first death metal I ever heard was in his shop. That was Dismember, and then bands like Punch and Stench. Then one day and he was always happy to play albums for us because he didn't get a lot of customers really, because it wasn't like such a huge market at that time. But I remember he said, yeah, we've got some black metal, and I said, oh, I've never heard that, what's black metal? And he pointed at this album and goes, that's black metal. And I said, okay, can we listen to it? And he said, yeah, sure, put it on. And then I'll never forget, it's just like it happened yesterday, when I heard that intro, Apologia. At the time, it sounded frightening. Like, you know, those whispered vocals and the evil chanting and everything. Like, it was actually terrifying. I was scared when I first heard that. And then that second track, E Alpro Vompo, like when the guitars swoop in and they're swarming and buzzing around you, and like those screamy vocals and everything and the blast beats, I just thought, wow, this is truly evil sounding but very atmospheric music. And then it was like, I was just punch drunk, floored for the rest. Like, we listened to the rest of it and I just thought, this is amazing, you know, like first time I heard metal music with keyboards and everything. And yeah, again, I still love it to this day. Like, I think it's a great album. This band has evolved a lot since then, but like this one always just has a special place for me because it was the first band which introduced me to this style those years ago. So yes, essential if you haven't heard it, Impaled Nazarene with Tolkorm's Nors Nors Nors. Alright. Okay, next, coming up to my favorite black metal band. This is Marduk with Panzer Division Marduk. Okay, so this album in my late teens, the first one I ever bought was Heaven Shall Burn, followed by Nightwing, and then those of the Unlight, I think. But then all of those albums are brilliant. I love Marduk, they're my favorite black metal band. But I'll never forget, this was the one that just completely kicked my ass on the first listen. Like when after the gunfire at the beginning of Panzer Division Marduk, when those riffs just roll in and bombard you, it's like, and the blast beat and the vocals, it's like, I instantly loved it within the first 10 seconds. It's like, all right, this is fucking awesome. And like, this was the album which was considered very extreme. It still got Frederick Anderson's thunderous drumming, and what made it different was it was just blast beats throughout, like just super fast the whole album. I do like Marduk's slower songs as well, but like it was just this one sounded even more menacing and more ferocious than Heaven Shall Burn and Nightwing, which is a bold statement because those albums are like brutal as well. But Baptism by Fire as well was just like, that blew me away when I first heard that. Yeah, so many great tracks. Some of my other favorite songs on this would be Beast of Prey and Blood Dawn, but again, 10 out of 10 album to me, and I loved it when I first heard it. Marduk with Panzer Division Marduk. Okay. Alright, what do we got next? This is Moon Soro with Veresakit. So you see, it's got this black jewel case. I don't know why they did that, but you can see here it's on this kind of rough paper cover. I think they could have done a better job with this cover, like the coloring's not very good, but anyway. Yeah, this was a band that I discovered in the tape trading days. This woman in New South Wales, she sent me like an MP3 of this, and like when I first heard the song Kahun Kinski, I was just completely blown away, stunned by how brilliant this was. It was like really majestic, atmospheric Viking / black metal, and I thought, you know what it really reminded me of? It took me back to Enslaved's early days, like that same kind of excitement and fervor of when I first heard like Slagedi Skorgen Borten 4 by Enslaved and Frost. It was like as good as that. And yeah, just great. They use violins, keyboards, and it's just so dark, and it sounds so huge and monumental and epic. And yeah, I just immediately loved this, and I thought, wow, thanks to the tape trading friend who introduced me to this, I loved it. This was the first album I bought. I've got a couple of other ones, but this one will always be my favorite. So essential black / folk metal. This is Moon Soro with Veresakit. Okay, and we're almost there. Considering the number of albums I'm talking about, don't think I'm doing too badly. Up next, Old Man's Child with The Pagan Prosperity. So again, a band I discovered in my late teens. This was one where I had read interviews with them in a magazine and never heard the actual music, but I thought, oh, they sounded a bit different. It's sort of like one of those new generation black metal bands. And there you go, Golda, who's now in Dimmu Borgir. But yes, I'll never forget when I heard the first track, The Millennium King. It just startling, you know, like immediately very aggressive when it goes in, but just so much melody and so much atmosphere with the keyboards and the clean vocals and everything. And this album is just stunning. Like every track is great. It invokes a lot of nostalgia for me of 1998. Like just every song on this is great. Some of my favorites. The Millennium King, that's probably the best track actually, to me. Also My Demonic Figures, Doommaker, What Malice Embrace. Yeah, but like, honestly, if you like melodic and sort of orchestral symphonic black metal, yeah, you'll love this. It's really good. Like, just the melodies are so infectious, you can't help but get the song stuck in your head. But really great album, Old Man's Child with The Pagan Prosperity. Okay, up next, another album which I loved at first listen. This is Summon with Fire Turns Everything Black. So, Summon were a black metal band from the US, and unfortunately they've broken up now. But this was one I got in my uni days actually. I just took through Relapse, I just took a gamble based on the description, but very good raw black metal. This is a demo, I believe, but it's sort of that obscure, eerie black metal like early Immortal. Think of like Diabolical, Full Moon Mysticism. And actually I think vocally and with some of the grooves in their music, they remind me a lot of early Immortal. So if that sounds up your alley, definitely check this band out. It's great. They've got just some, yeah, really standout melodies, good songwriting, and they have all these atmospheric interludes, you know, like crackling fires and things like that. But like some of my favorite songs on this would be Eve of Anti-Creation, Praising to a Blackened Moon, and Burning Black Desire, which is a very catchy song. And the outro, Forest of Dark Spirits, has got some howling wolves and everything, just all invoking a great atmosphere. So underrated band and album. That's Summon with Fire Turns Everything Black. Okay. So I don't need to say it every time, but you're familiar that these are albums that I just love at first listen. Okay, and second last one. This is Ulva with Bergtatt. So again, most of you probably know this band with good reason. This very influential melodic folky black metal from Norway. This band was been around since the late 90s, I think, and actually the first album I heard by them was Nuttons Madrigal, which was very harsh. That took me a while to get my head around that album, to be honest. It was like Transylvanian Hunger on harsh steroids, if you know what I mean. But then when I bought this one, I was really pleasantly surprised. And by the way, I do love Nuttons Madrigal. You just have to be in the right mood to listen to that. But was that love at first listen? Not for me, because it was a bit too extreme. But this one, yeah, it was just mind-blowing. When I first heard it, it was like very melodic, very mellow, with a lot of clean vocals, like Viking dirgy-like vocals, and just so much melody and atmosphere. Like they've got choral vocals and acoustic guitars and atmospheric interludes. This album has just got so much, and it was unique. And I remember when I first heard it, like again, 19 years old, like I was discovering a lot of bands at that time. I just thought, how do they do it? This is brilliant. This is magnificent. So which one is my favorite? I also really like Kveldsanger. Like that could have been another love at first listen album actually, but this was the first one I heard by them, which really blew me away. And to this day, it's still a classic. So definitely check it out if you haven't heard it. That's Ulva with Bergtatt. Okay. And coming to the very last CD for this video, this is Udo with Steel Factory. So I have talked about this in a previous video ages ago, but of course, Udo is the band of former Accept frontman Udo Dirkschneider, solo band. This was one I bought only about a year ago actually, but I got my brother into Accept, and then he became a massive Udo fan. He recommended this album. I decided to blind buy it, and 15 tracks on here, just fucking awesome. Like really going back to the old days of Accept. It's very nostalgic. It'll remind you of early Accept, and it really did with me. Like the song like Make the Move, the second track, it's very similar to Living for Tonight from like dan 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 dan, you know, that riff, but like very Scorpions-esque actually. It's really amazing when an album has 15 songs and there's not one bad one. There's all different sorts of tempos. They've got like slow songs, fast songs, aggressive ones, more sort of epic and ballady type songs, but like never soft ballads, but just like slower ones, you know. But really, if you're an Accept fan and you haven't heard this album, definitely check it out. It just blew me away. I just thought 100%, 10 out of 10. It's a great album, so definitely check this out. Udo with Steel Factory. And sorry, speaking of Scorpions, this is one I forgot to mention. Another love at first listen album, Scorpions with Savage Amusement. So a lot of people felt that this album in the late 80s, it was more refined than Love at First Sting. You know, that was the album with Rock You Like a Hurricane. Like that one and Blackout were considered their classic albums, and a lot of people thought this one was kind of like a disappointment. They had softened up or something, but I wouldn't say that. I just think they used better production. It was more sort of polished production, and then they were experimenting with some things that Def Leppard had done, that kind of thing. But why I love this album is just the epitome of the 80s sound. Like you play this, it's the soundtrack to 1988. And I think maybe being a child of the 80s, it sits with me in that way, where I really love this album. Like very 80s sound and just like classic and anthemic hard rock, heavy metal, so many good songs. But some of my favorites would be especially Don't Stop at the Top, the first track. Rhythm of Love, just a great power ballad, really good song. Also Walking on the Edge, Every Minute, Every Day, underrated song. And Believe in Love, like that's kind of like a softer ballad one, but they just nail it, do it really well. So that's Scorpions with Savage Amusement. Another one where I think I'm a big fan of Scorpions, but this, not so much the later stuff, but especially, you know, up to the 90s. But this was the one that just grabbed me instantly, and I think I had that affinity with it because I was growing up in the 80s, so that sound appeals to me. Anyway guys, I've gone on long enough for this video, so thanks for your patience. I hope you stuck it out. So I know that's a lot that I talked about, but all of these albums, I just loved when I first listened to them. So You're probably familiar with a lot of them, but if you haven't heard any of these and you think they sound interesting to you, definitely check them out, because in my opinion, you're not going to be disappointed. Okay, so thanks a lot for watching. Thanks, Raul, for coming up with the idea. I hope people enjoyed the video. Please leave a thumbs up to support me. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.